The black Bugatti skidded to a halt outside Manhattan General at 3 in the morning, and Adrian Calloway, billionaire CEO, man who'd built empires on ice-cold logic, stumbled out with blood on his Brioni suit. He wasn't hurt. The blood belonged to the woman he'd hit. The woman now lying in surgery because he'd been distracted for one fatal second by a phone call about a merger. He stood in the sterile hallway, hands shaking for the first time in his 32 years. And when the surgeon finally emerged, Adrian made a decision that would unravel everything he believed about himself. He would pay for her care, every cent, every treatment. He would make this right. He didn't know her name yet. He didn't know that saving her life would cost him his heart. The surgeon said she was stable. Adrian should have walked away then. He didn't. Her name was Alina Rossi, and when she woke 3 days later, she didn't scream or cry or threaten lawsuits. She looked at him with eyes the color of honey in sunlight and asked if he was all right. Adrian, who'd never been asked that question by anyone who meant it, felt something crack in his chest. She was a music teacher. She'd been walking home from a late tutoring session. She had hospital bills she couldn't pay even before his car had found her in that crosswalk. He offered her money enough to erase her debts, enough to disappear from his conscience. Elena refused. She had pride, she said, running her fingers over the cast on her left arm. She wouldn't take charity. So Adrian, who solved every problem with his checkbook, found himself facing an impossible equation. She needed help. She wouldn't take his money, and he couldn't stop visiting her hospital room. His lawyers called it liability management. His brother called it obsession. Adrian called it nothing at all, but he returned every evening, bringing coffee she actually liked, instead of the sludge from the hospital cafeteria. They talked. She told him about the students she taught, kids from neighborhoods where music lessons were luxury. He told her about the company his father had built, the empire he'd inherited at 25 when both parents died in a plane crash. Alina listened like his words mattered, not his net worth. She sketched staff lines on paper napkins, humming melodies she was composing. Adrian, who attended the Philharmonic for networking, not pleasure, found himself learning the difference between forte and fortissimo. On the 7th day, her doctor delivered news that shattered them both. The nerve damage in Elena's hand was permanent. She would never play piano professionally again. Everything she'd worked for dissolved in one night. Adrian watched her face crumble, and he made another decision that would change everything. His penthouse occupied the entire 58th floor of Calloway Tower. Floor-to-ceiling windows framing Manhattan like a kingdom laid at his feet. Adrian brought Alina there the day she was discharged, ignoring his assistant's raised eyebrows and his head of security's concerns. She needed somewhere to recover. His building had medical staff on call, a private gym for physical therapy, everything she required. Alina stood in his living room, this woman in a borrowed coat, looking impossibly small against his walls of steel and glass. She should have felt out of place. Instead, she walked to the windows and pressed her palm against the glass. And Adrian realized his penthouse had never felt like home until this moment. She would stay here, he insisted, just until she recovered. Just until she figured out what came next. Alina agreed to 2 weeks. She didn't know he'd already decided she would never leave. The chemistry between them was violence barely restrained. Adrian would find her at the piano in his music room, the room he'd bought furnished, and never entered, working through exercises with her damaged hand, tears streaming silently down her face. He would stand in the doorway, and the air between them would thicken until neither could breathe. She wore his shirts because her clothes were still at her apartment in Queens. The sight of her in his Oxford button-down, sleeves rolled up, hair messy from sleep, did something to him that no woman in a designer gown ever had, but he didn't touch her. Adrian Calloway didn't do relationships. His parents' marriage had been a corporate merger that ended in mutual resentment. He'd watched love make his father weak, make his mother bitter, so he kept his distance. Even as Alina filled his home with laughter and humming and the smell of the pasta she cooked. Even as every cell in his body screamed to cross the room and kiss her, until neither of them remembered why this was complicated. The breaking point came on a Friday night when Adrian's ex-fiancée appeared at his door, Vanessa Huntington, daughter of old money, woman he'd almost married before realizing marriage without love was just another business deal he couldn't stomach. She swept into his penthouse like she owned it, diamonds glittering at her throat, and her eyes landed on Alina with surgical precision. "The charity case," Vanessa said, voice dripping poison. "How philanthropic of you, Adrian." Alina went very still. Adrian felt rage burn through his veins, white-hot and clarifying. He'd ended things with Vanessa 6 months ago. She'd taken it badly. Now she smiled like a predator who'd found weakness. "I suppose I should warn you," Vanessa said to Alina. "Adrian doesn't do love. He doesn't do relationships. You're a project, darling, a tax write-off with a pulse." Then she turned to Adrian. "My father's ready to discuss the Huntington-Calloway merger again. I'll be at dinner tomorrow night, 8 o'clock, per se. Don't be late." She left in a cloud of perfume. Alina started packing. Adrian found her in the guest room, throwing clothes into a duffel bag with her good hand. "She's right," Alina said without looking at him. "I don't belong here. I don't belong in your world." He should have let her go. Every rational part of him knew it. Instead, Adrian crossed the room and caught her wrist, gentle around the healing bones. Don't, he said, and his voice came out raw. Elena finally looked at him, eyes bright with unshed tears. Why, she whispered. Why do you want me to stay? Adrian had spent years perfecting the art of deception, of boardroom poker faces and strategic silence. But standing there with Elena looking at him like he was someone who could hurt her, he found he couldn't lie. Because you make me feel human again, he said. Because I haven't been able to work or sleep or think about anything but you for 3 weeks. Because this penthouse was a monument to everything I'd achieved, and you walked in and made it a home. Elena's breath hitched. Adrian, I'm going to that dinner tomorrow, he interrupted. And I'm bringing you. Per se occupied the 4th floor of the Time Warner Center, and Adrian hated every gilded inch of it. He hated the way Vanessa's father assessed Elena like livestock, the way Vanessa touched his arm possessively, the way Elena sat rigidly in a borrowed designer dress that cost more than she used to make in a month. The merger discussion was a formality. The Huntingtons wanted Calloway backing for a real estate venture. Adrian wanted nothing to do with it. Halfway through the second course, Vanessa leaned across the table. You've gone quiet, Adrian. Not having second thoughts about your little project, are you? Elena's hand trembled around her wine glass. Adrian made a choice. He stood, dropped his napkin on his untouched Dover sole, and held out his hand to Elena. We're leaving, he said. Vanessa's father sputtered. Vanessa's face went white with rage. Adrian didn't care. Elena took his hand and they walked out of that restaurant like it was burning. In the elevator down, Adrian pulled her against him and kissed her for the first time, desperate and claiming. Elena kissed him back like she was drowning and he was air. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, she whispered, "What are we doing?" Adrian rested his forehead against hers. I have no idea. But I'm done pretending I don't want you. They barely made it back to the penthouse before his hands were in her hair, her back against the door, months of tension finally breaking. Adrian kissed her like a man possessed, and Elena met him with equal hunger, her good hand fisted in his shirt. They stumbled toward his bedroom, shedding clothes and pretense. But when they fell onto his bed, Elena suddenly pulled back, breathing hard. Wait, she gasped. Adrian, wait. He froze immediately, rolling off her. Did I hurt you? No. She sat up, holding the sheet against her chest, and he watched her gather courage. I need to know this isn't just physical for you. I need to know I'm not actually just a project. Adrian sat up for the first time in his life. He let someone see him completely vulnerable. You terrify me, he said quietly. I've built my entire life on control, on logic, on never letting anyone close enough to matter. And then you happened, and everything I thought I knew about myself turned out to be wrong. He reached out, tucked her hair behind her ear with shaking fingers. You're not a project, Elena. You're the first real thing I've felt in years. She kissed him then, soft and sweet, and they made love like it meant something. Afterward, Elena curled against his chest, tracing patterns on his skin, and Adrian held her like she might disappear if he loosened his grip. He told her things he'd never told anyone about the pressure of inheriting an empire at 25, about the loneliness of always being the smartest person in the room, about his terror that he was becoming his father, cold and calculating and incapable of connection. Elena listened and understood in ways that made his chest ache. When dawn broke over the city, painting his bedroom in shades of gold, Adrian watched her sleep and realized he'd spent his whole life thinking love was weakness. He'd been catastrophically wrong. Love was the most dangerous thing he'd ever encountered, because now he had something to lose, and in his world everything could be taken. Monday morning, Adrian's head of security delivered news that changed everything. Someone was investigating Elena, her background, her finances, her connection to Adrian, professional job, expensive, thorough. Adrian felt ice in his veins. Who hired them? Still working on it. But boss, there's something else. Marcus hesitated. The investigator found something. Elena Rossi is not her real name. The world tilted. Adrian sat down hard in his office chair. Manhattan spread below him like a lie. Explained she legally changed it 7 years ago. Her birth name is Elena Marcus pulled up a file on his tablet. Her father is Antonio Valentini. Adrian's blood went cold. Antonio Valentini ran the Valentini crime family, one of the last old-school operations in New York. Drugs, extortion, money laundering. The FBI had been trying to bring him down for 2 decades. Elena is Valentina's daughter, Marcus confirmed. She cut ties with the family 7 years ago, changed her name, went completely straight. But Adrian, if this gets out, if anyone connects you to Valentini's daughter while you're negotiating those city contracts, he didn't finish, he didn't need to. Adrian's company was built on legitimacy, on being cleaner than clean. Association with organized crime would destroy everything, but all Adrian could think was, Elena had secrets too, and someone wanted him to know. Her voice cracked. Then your car hit me, and everything I'd built was destroyed, and the one good thing that came from it was you. She looked at him with eyes full of desperate hope and terrible fear. So now you have to decide, Adrian. Do you believe I'm my father's daughter, or do you believe I'm the woman who fell in love with you? Adrian stood frozen, and Elena's face crumbled. That's what I thought, she whispered, and walked past him toward the door. Adrian let her take 3 steps before his body caught up with his heart. He caught her hand and pulled her back, crushing his mouth to hers. When they broke apart, he said against her lips, "I believe you're mine. Everything else is just noise we'll deal with together." But neither of them knew that Elena's past was already coming for them, and this time, loving each other wouldn't be enough to survive it. Elena didn't leave that night, but the revelation hung between them like smoke, obscuring everything they'd built. Adrian made calls to his legal team, to Marcus, to people whose job was making problems disappear. He would protect her. He would insulate her from her father's world. But at 3 in the morning, he found her standing at the windows, wrapped in one of his shirts, staring at the city lights. "I need to tell you everything," she said without turning. So she did. She told him about growing up in a mansion that was really a prison, about her mother who'd died trying to leave, about the violence she'd witnessed that still woke her screaming. She told him about the night she ran, with nothing but a backpack and her mother's old piano books, about working 3 jobs to put herself through college, about changing her name in a courthouse with shaking hands. "I thought I could outrun it," Elena whispered. "But you can't outrun blood." Adrian pulled her against his chest. "Watch me prove you wrong." The attack came Thursday morning. Adrian was in a board meeting when Marcus burst in, face grim. "We need to move." Now in the car, Marcus explained, someone had leaked Elena's real identity to the press. By noon, every major outlet would be running the story billionaire CEO dating mob princess. The optics were catastrophic. Adrian's board would demand he cut ties. His investors would panic. The city contracts he'd spent 18 months negotiating would evaporate. Marcus laid out the options with brutal efficiency. Public statement, distancing himself from Elena, immediate separation, damage control. Adrian listened in silence, then said, "No." Marcus blinked. "Boss," I said no. Adrian's voice was steel. "Get our PR team on this. We control the narrative. Elena left that life 7 years ago. She's a victim, not a criminal. And anyone who has a problem with that can go to hell." He pulled out his phone and called his lawyer. "I want a full security detail on Elena 24/7. And get me everything on Antonio Valentini if he comes near her. I want to know before he takes the first step." But Adrian underestimated how fast his world would turn on him. By evening, 3 board members had called emergency meetings. His biggest investor sent a terse email, "Handled this or we pull out." Vanessa Huntington gave an interview to the Wall Street Journal, tearfully explaining how she'd tried to warn Adrian about his dangerous infatuation. The vultures circled, and Adrian felt his empire shake. He came home to find Elena packing again. "Don't," he said from the doorway. "I'm destroying your life." She didn't look at him, just kept folding clothes with mechanical precision. "Every minute I stay here, it gets worse. Your company's stock dropped 4% today. 4% because of me." Adrian crossed the room and took the shirt from her hands. "I don't care. You should." Elena finally met his eyes, and hers were swimming with tears. "I care about you too much to watch you lose everything because you're too stubborn to let me go." He cupped her face in his hands. "Then you don't understand what you've become to me." He kissed her with desperation, and Elena surrendered with a broken sound that shattered something in his chest. They made love with urgency, with the knowledge that the world was trying to tear them apart, and it felt like defiance. Afterward, Adrian held her in the darkness and made a confession. "I told you my parents died in a plane crash," he said quietly. "That's true. What I didn't tell you is why they were on that plane." Elena went still against him. "My father was having an affair. My mother found out they were flying to our house in the Hamptons to fight somewhere the press couldn't see. The pilot said they were screaming at each other right before the engine failed." His voice went hollow. "The investigators said it was mechanical failure. I've always wondered if my father was so angry he didn't notice the warnings, if their hatred for each other killed them." Elena turned to look at him. "That's why you don't believe in love." "I didn't," Adrian corrected, past tense. "Because you make me believe in things I thought were fairy tales." The charity gala was unavoidable. The Callaway Foundation's annual benefit, 500 of New York's elite, and Adrian was expected to give the keynote address. His team begged him to go alone. Adrian ignored them and brought Elena. She wore a gown he'd had commissioned, midnight blue silk that made her look like starlight, sapphires at her throat that cost more than most people's houses. When they walked into the Plaza Ballroom together, the room went silent. Then the whispers started, spreading like wildfire. Adrian felt Elena's hand tremble in his hand, tremble in his ear. "Eyes on me, only me." For 3 hours, Adrian worked the room with Elena at his side, daring anyone to say a word. His hand stayed possessively at the small of her back. When men looked at her with speculation or judgment, Adrian's eyes promised violence. When Vanessa approached with venom in her smile, Adrian cut her off before she could speak. "Walk away," he said quietly, "or I'll ruin you and your father both. Choose wisely." Vanessa went white and retreated. Elena squeezed his hand, but the real threat came from an unexpected direction. Antonio Valentini himself appeared at the gala, silver-haired and distinguished in a tuxedo, looking like someone's beloved grandfather instead of a crime lord. Adrian felt Elena go rigid beside him. Valentini smiled and walked toward them through the crowd. "Elena," he said warmly, "my daughter, it's been too long." Adrian stepped partially in front of her. "You're not welcome here." "I'm a donor to the Callaway Foundation," Valentini said mildly. $500,000 a year. Surely that buys me a conversation with my own child. He looked past Adrian to Elena Jew. Look beautiful. To Soro, your mother would be proud. Don't, Elena whispered. Don't you dare talk about her. Valentina's eyes hardened. We should speak privately. You and I, there are things you don't understand. Adrian felt dangerous. She's not going anywhere with you. Then I'll say it here, Valentini replied. He looked at Adrian with calculation. Has my daughter told you why she really ran 7 years ago? The full truth? Elena's face drained of color. Adrian looked between them, feeling ice spread through his veins. What's he talking about? It's not, Elena started, but Valentini cut her off. She didn't just run from an arranged marriage, he said. She ran because she witnessed something, a business transaction that went wrong. A federal prosecutor was getting too close to our operations, so we made him disappear. He smiled without warmth. Elena saw the whole thing. For 7 years, she's been the only witness to a murder the FBI would love to solve. That's why I've left her alone, mutual assured destruction. She talks. She becomes a witness who'll spend her life in protective custody. She stays quiet and hidden. Everyone's happy. Adrian felt the world tilt. He looked at Elena, whose eyes were full of guilt and terror. Is it true? She nodded mutely. Valentini continued. Now she's not hidden anymore. Now she's on the front page of every newspaper, standing next to one of the most powerful men in New York. People are asking questions. The FBI is sniffing around. And I need to know, Elena, are you going to become a problem? The threat hung in the air like poison. Adrian's mind raced through scenarios, each one worse than the last. If Elena testified, she'd be in danger for the rest of her life. If she didn't, she was complicit in covering up murder. And Valentini was right, the FBI would come. They were probably already building a case. Leave, Adrian said quietly. Now before I have security remove you. Valentini laughed. You think you can protect her? You're a businessman, Calloway. I'm a different breed. The moment you decide my daughter is worth sacrificing everything for, that's when you'll learn the difference between wealth and power. He looked at Elena one more time. You have 48 hours to decide what you're going to tell the FBI when they come asking questions. Choose wisely, Tesoro. Your boyfriend's empire isn't the only thing at stake. He walked away, leaving Adrian and Elena standing in the middle of the ballroom, the gala continuing around them like nothing had shattered. Elena's hands were shaking. I need to leave, she whispered. I need to get out of here right now. They barely spoke in the car ride home. In the penthouse, Elena paced like a caged animal while Adrian poured himself a scotch and tried to think. You should have told me, he finally said. I know, the FBI, Elena. They're going to come after you for obstruction, for being an accessory after the fact. I know. She whirled on him, eyes blazing. Do you think I don't know? I've lived with this for 7 years. Every day wondering if today's the day they find me. If today's the day my father decides I'm too big a liability. If today's the day it all comes crashing down. Her voice broke. And then I met you, and for the first time since I ran, I felt safe. I felt like maybe I could have a normal life, a real life, with someone who. She stopped, pressing her hands to her face. Adrian set down his drink. With someone who what? With someone who made me believe in happy endings, Elena whispered. But I don't get those. Women like me don't get those. Adrian crossed to her and pulled her hands away from her face, forcing her to look at him. What if you testified? Elena's eyes went wide. What? Against your father? Full immunity deal. You give the FBI what they need to put him away, and they protect you. Witness protection, new identity, everything. Adrian, he would kill me. He would kill everyone I care about. He would. Her voice caught as a realization hit. He would kill you. Let him try. Adrian's voice was ice. I have resources too. I can protect us both. But Elena, you can't live like this forever. Running, hiding, looking over your shoulder. He cupped her face in his hands. Let me help you end this. Let me give you your life back. Elena searched his face, and what she saw there made tears spill down her cheeks. You would do that? Risk everything? I already risked everything the night I decided not to walk away from your hospital room, Adrian said. He kissed her softly. I'm all in, Elena. The only question is, are you? She kissed him back with answer written in every touch, and they stumbled toward his bedroom for the second time that night. But this time felt different, like a claiming, like a promise, like two people deciding to face the fire together. Adrian made love to her slowly, worshipping every inch of her skin, and when Elena came apart in his arms, she whispered his name like a prayer. Afterward, wrapped in his sheets with the city glittering below them, she said, if I do this, if I testify, it changes everything. Your company, your reputation, the life you've built. You'll be the man who brought down a crime family. That comes with consequences. Adrian traced patterns on her bare shoulder. I built an empire by 27. If I have to rebuild it, I will. But I'm not losing you. Elena was quiet for a long moment. Then, there's one more thing you should know. Adrian tensed. What? The prosecutor my father killed. His name was David Morrison. She took a shaky breath. He was also your godfather. The words hit Adrian like a physical blow. He sat up, staring at her. What? Elena sat up too, pulling the sheet around herself. I didn't know at first. I didn't make the connection until tonight when I saw old photos in your study. But Adrian, the man my father murdered was David Morrison, your father's best friend, the man who was supposed to look after you if anything happened to your parents. Adrian felt like he was falling. David Morrison had disappeared 7 years ago, presumed dead but never found. The investigation had gone nowhere. Adrian had mourned him, this man who'd been more uncle than godfather, and moved on because that's what you did with grief. But now you witnessed his murder, he said flatly. Yes, and you never said anything. I was 20 years old and terrified. Elena's voice cracked. I ran, Adrian. I ran because I knew if I stayed I'd be next. I'm sorry, God. I'm so sorry, but I can't change what I did. Adrian stood, pulled on pants, paced to the windows. His mind was chaos, rage and grief and betrayal all tangled together. He stood there for 10 minutes, maybe 20, while Alina sat in his bed watching him with heartbreak written across her face. When Adrian finally turned back to her, his expression was cold. Get out. Alina flinched like he'd struck her. Adrian, get out of my bed, out of my home. Now his voice was razors. You let me fall in love with you knowing you'd witnessed my godfather's murder. Knowing you'd stayed silent for 7 years while his wife wondered what happened to him. While his kids grew up without knowing if their father was alive or dead. I didn't know you then, Alina pleaded. By the time I realized the connection, I was already what? Already in too deep, already thinking you could keep this secret forever. Adrian laughed bitterly. You're just like them. Just like everyone in this city. You saw an opportunity and you took it. That's not fair. Life isn't fair. Adrian grabbed his phone. Marcus will arrange a hotel. You'll be out of here within the hour. Tomorrow, my lawyers will contact you about next steps with the FBI. After that, I don't want to see you again. Alina stood, wrapped in his sheet, and Adrian forced himself not to look at her. If he looked, he might break. I love you, she whispered. That was real. Everything between us was real. Adrian said nothing. After a moment, Alina gathered her clothes and walked out of his bedroom. 20 minutes later, he heard the elevator doors close. Then he was alone with his city and his rage and the knowledge that he'd just sent away the only woman he'd ever loved. Adrian poured another drink and threw it against the window, watching the glass shatter. Then he called his head of legal. I want everything on Antonio Valentini. Every transaction, every associate, every crime he's ever committed. And I want it yesterday. If Alina wouldn't bring down her father, Adrian would do it himself, even if it destroyed them both. Adrian spent 5 days building a case against Antonio Valentini that would have made federal prosecutors weep with joy. He barely slept, surviving on black coffee and fury, turning his penthouse into a war room. Marcus brought him files. His lawyers brought him connections. His private investigators brought him evidence of 2 decades of crimes. But every piece of information felt hollow because Alina wasn't there to see it. She haunted every corner of his home. Her coffee mug still sat in the kitchen sink. Her sheet music was still scattered across the piano. At night, Adrian lay in bed where they'd made love and stared at the ceiling, remembering how she'd looked at him like he was someone worth saving. On the 6th day, his brother James showed up unannounced. You look like hell, James observed. Get out. Not until you tell me why you're destroying yourself over a woman. Adrian didn't answer. He didn't trust his voice. James poured himself a drink and settled into the leather chair across from Adrian's desk. The board met yesterday. They want you to make a statement. Publicly distance yourself from Alina Rossi or Valentini or whatever her name is. Reassure investors. Do damage control. Adrian kept his eyes on the Valentini files. No, Adrian, your company lost 80 million in market cap this week. Your biggest investor pulled out. The city contracts are dead. You're bleeding money because you can't let go of. I said no. Adrian finally looked up, and whatever James saw on his face made him go quiet. I'm not making any statements. I'm not distancing myself from anyone. I'm going to bring down Antonio Valentini, and when I do, Elena's testimony will be the key. So the board can either stand with me or get out of my way. James studied him for a long moment. You love her. It wasn't a question. Adrian didn't deny it. Then why did you throw her out? His brother asked quietly. Because she lied to me. Because she watched someone I loved die and said nothing. Because she was terrified, James countered. She was 20 years old. Adrian, you would have run too. The words hit too close to home. Adrian stood and walked to the windows. This view that used to mean everything and now meant nothing. I don't know how to forgive her, he admitted. And I don't know how to stop loving her. James joined him at the window. You want my advice? The board doesn't matter. The investors don't matter. The only thing that matters is whether you can live without her. And from where I'm standing, little brother, you can't. Adrian closed his eyes. James was right. These 5 days without Alina had been the longest of his life. Every morning he awoke reaching for her. Every night he fell asleep remembering her voice. The penthouse was a mausoleum now, 58 floors of emptiness that money couldn't fill. He'd built an empire and it meant nothing without her. Where is she? Adrian asked hoarsely. James pulled out his phone. Marcus has been keeping tabs. She's at the Grand Hyatt, room 2847. The FBI contacted her 3 days ago. They want her to testify in front of a grand jury next week. Adrian's blood went cold. Next week, Antonio Valentini knows he's making moves. Marcus thinks Adrian was already walking toward the elevator. The Grand Hyatt was 20 minutes from his building, but Adrian made it in 12. Traffic laws be damned. He took the elevator to the 28th floor with his heart trying to break out of his chest. Stood outside room 2847 for 30 seconds, gathering courage. Then knocked. Silence, then footsteps. The door opened and Alina stood there in yoga pants and an oversized sweater. No makeup, hair in a messy bun. And she was the most beautiful thing Adrian had ever seen. Her eyes went wide. "Adrian, can I come in?" His voice was rough. She stepped aside wordlessly. The hotel room was generic and soulless, nothing like his penthouse. And the thought of Alina living here made Adrian want to burn the world down. She stood by the window, arms wrapped around herself, and the distance between them felt infinite. "I'm sorry," they both said at the same time. Alina laughed, broken and wet. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you about David Morrison," she continued. "I'm sorry I was a coward. I'm sorry for all of it. I'm sorry I threw you out," Adrian said. "I'm sorry I let my anger matter more than he couldn't finish." Alina crossed to him, stopped a foot away, close enough to touch but not touching. "More than what you whispered." Adrian looked at her and felt everything he'd tried to suppress for 6 days come roaring back. "More than the fact that I can't breathe without you," he said. "More than the fact that I've spent 5 days building a case against your father that will put him away for life. And the only thing I could think about was whether you'd be safe when I did it. More than the fact that I love you so much it's destroying me." Alina's breath caught. A tear slipped down her cheek. "You love me. God, Alina, how could you not know?" Adrian closed the distance between them, framing her face with shaking hands. "I've loved you since you woke up in that hospital room and asked if I was all right. I've loved you through every lie, every secret, every impossible thing. I love you enough to watch my company burn if it means keeping you safe." He pressed his forehead to hers. "I don't care what you did 7 years ago. I don't care that you're Valentini's daughter. I care that you're here, that you're real, that you make me feel things I didn't think I was capable of feeling." Adrian, Alina whispered, and then she was kissing him desperately, her hands in his hair, her body pressed against his like she could merge them into one person. He kissed her back like he was drowning. They barely made it to the bed before clothes were torn off and skin met skin. Adrian made love to Alina like it was the first time and the last time, like he could pour 7 days of missing her into every touch. She came apart beneath him with his name on her lips, and when he followed her over the edge, he understood for the first time what it meant to be completely vulnerable, to give someone the power to destroy you and trust they won't. Afterward, they lay tangled together, hearts still racing, and Adrian told her everything. The case he was building, the evidence he'd compiled, the plan to bring down Antonio Valentini and half his organization in one move. "It's airtight," he said, "but it needs you. Your testimony is the linchpin. Without it, Valentini walks." Alina traced patterns on his chest, processing. "If I testify, he'll come for me. For us, Adrian, he's not the kind of man who forgives betrayal." "I know. That's why we need to move fast. The grand jury hearing is in 6 days. You testify, Valentini gets arrested and we disappear while the trial happens." "Disappear where?" "Anywhere, everywhere. I have homes in London, Tokyo, Sydney. We can go somewhere he'll never find us." Adrian caught her hand, pressed it over his heart. "I'm asking you to trust me, to let me protect you." Alina looked at him with eyes full of warring emotions. "What about your company, your life here?" "I'll rebuild," Adrian said simply. "Companies can be recreated. Money can be made again, but you, Alina, you're irreplaceable." She kissed him softly. "I'll testify. I'll do whatever it takes to end this." They spent that night planning their next move, and for the first time in a week, Adrian felt like he could breathe. But at 3 in the morning, Elena's phone rang. Unknown number. She answered on speaker. "Hello." Antonio Valentini's voice filled the room like poison. "Alina, I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." Adrian went rigid. "How did you get this number?" Elena's voice was steel. "I've always had it, sweetheart. Just like I've always known where you were. Did you really think I let you go 7 years ago out of sentimentality? I let you run because you were useful to me running? A daughter in the wind, no connections to the family, perfect alibi if anyone ever came asking questions." Valentini paused. "But now you've become inconvenient. Now you're testifying against me. So I'm calling to make you an offer. I'm not interested. You will be. Because if you testify, I don't come after you. I come after Adrian Calloway." The threat hung in the air like smoke. Adrian took the phone from Elena's shaking hand. "Valentini. Ah, the boyfriend. Tell me, Mr. Calloway, how much is your company worth?" "3 billion. For Valentini's voice was conversational. "I can destroy that in a week. Your investors, your partners, your clients, I have connections to all of them. One word from me and they'll scatter like rats. You'll be bankrupt by Christmas." "Try it," Adrian said coldly. "I've weathered worse. I'm sure you have. But can you weather me coming after everyone you love? Your brother James, his wife and kids. Your goddaughter who just turned 5. Adrian felt ice in his veins. "If you touch them, you'll what? Call the police?" "Please," Valentini laughed. "I'm offering you a deal. Mr. Calloway, Alina withdraws her testimony. You both walk away from this. In return, I leave your family alone. Everyone goes back to their corners and we pretend this unpleasantness never happened. Adrian looked at Alina. She was crying silently, her hand pressed to her mouth. And if we refuse, Adrian asked, then I demonstrate what real power looks like. And you learn that love is the greatest weakness a man can have. The line went dead. Adrian set down the phone with careful precision, his mind racing through scenarios. Valentini had just declared war, and the man was right about one thing: he could destroy everything Adrian had built. The investors, the contracts, the company, all of it could vanish if Valentini applied enough pressure in the right places. But more terrifying was the threat against James and his family. I can't do it, Elena whispered. I can't let him hurt them because of me. Elena, no. She stood, pacing like a trapped animal. Your nieces, Adrian, they're babies. I won't have their blood on my hands. So what? You just let Valentini win. You spend the rest of your life running. Adrian stood too, catching her shoulders. That's not living. It's better than watching everyone you love die, Elena shouted. Then, softer, broken, I can't be the reason you lose your family. I won't survive that. Adrian pulled her against his chest, feeling her shake. His mind was working, calculating. There had to be a way out. There always was. You just had to be willing to pay the price. And suddenly, he knew what he had to do. Marry me, he said. Elena went still. What? Marry me, right now, tonight. Adrian pulled back to look at her. Spousal privilege means you can't be compelled to testify against me. And it means anything you tell me is protected. We get married. You tell me everything about your father's operation, and I become the witness instead of you. Elena stared at him like he'd lost his mind. Adrian, that doesn't, you can't just, I can testify about what you told me without it being hearsay if I establish it properly. My legal team can make it work. His words came faster, the plan crystallizing. Valentini threatened you to keep you quiet. That threat extends to me too now. It strengthens the case, and more importantly, it takes the target off your back and puts it on mine. He'll kill you. He'll try. Adrian cupped her face in his hands. But I have resources he's never dealt with before. Security, legal teams, connections. I can protect myself in ways you couldn't protect yourself 7 years ago. This is insane. It's the only way we both survive this, Adrian said. Valentini wants you silent because you're the witness, so we make me the witness instead. You're my wife, under my protection, under my name. Let him come after me. I'll be ready. Alina searched his face. You're serious. You actually want to marry me. I've wanted to marry you since the night at Per Se when you kissed me in that elevator, Adrian admitted. This just moves up the timeline. He kissed her softly. So what do you say, Alina Rossi? Will you be Alina Calloway and let me spend the rest of my life protecting you? She said yes with tears streaming down her face, and 3 hours later they stood in a 24-hour wedding chapel in Queens with Marcus and James as witnesses. Alina wore the clothes she'd been wearing when Adrian showed up. Adrian still had on his suit from 5 days ago. The officiant was half asleep and the room smelled like cheap incense. It was perfect. When Adrian slipped a platinum band on Elena's finger purchased from the only jewelry store open at 4 in the morning, he felt something fundamental shift in his chest. She was his now, his to protect, his to love, his to keep safe no matter what it cost. They kissed and it tasted like promises. Like forever. Like two people choosing each other despite impossible odds. In the car afterward, Alina leaned against Adrian's shoulder and whispered, "What happens now?" Now Adrian kissed the top of her head. Now we go to war. The grand jury hearing was in 5 days. Adrian spent every minute preparing. His legal team worked around the clock, building a case that would put Antonio Valentini away for the rest of his life. Alina sat with Adrian's lawyers for hours, telling them everything she remembered from that night 7 years ago. Every detail, every word, every face. It was excruciating to watch her relive it. But Adrian held her hand through all of it. On the 4th day, Valentini made his move. A car tried to run Adrian off the road on his way to the office. Then his building's security system was hacked. Then someone sent a package to his penthouse that Marcus intercepted. Inside was a photo of James's daughter at her kindergarten with a red X across her face. Adrian sent James and his family out of the country immediately. Then he doubled his security and installed Alina in the most secure part of his penthouse with armed guards outside the door. She hated it. "I feel like a prisoner," she said that night as they lay in bed. "You're alive," Adrian countered. "That's what matters. Is this how we're going to live? Always looking over our shoulders?" Alina turned to face him. "Even if your testimony puts my father away, he has people, associates, they'll come after us. Let them try." Adrian's voice was hard. "I'm done being afraid, Alina. I'm done letting men like your father control the world through fear. Tomorrow I testify. The day after that he's arrested. And then we start building the life we should have had from the beginning." Alina kissed him slowly. "I love you," she whispered against his lips. "No matter what happens tomorrow, I need you to know that. You changed my life, Adrian Calloway. You saved mine," he replied. They made love that night like it might be the last time, holding each other through the darkness. The grand jury hearing happened in a federal courthouse in Lower Manhattan. Adrian sat in the witness box for 4 hours and told them everything Alina had witnessed. He detailed the murder of David Morrison, the cover-up, the 7 years of silence enforced by threats. He provided documents, recordings, financial records that tied Antonio Valentini to a dozen major crimes. The prosecutors were salivating by the end of it. When Adrian walked out of the courthouse, federal agents were already moving to arrest Valentini, but Valentini was gone. His house was empty. His known associates had scattered. It was like he'd vanished into smoke. For 2 days, the FBI searched while Adrian and Alina waited in lockdown. Then on the 3rd day, Marcus got word Valentini had been spotted at a private airfield outside the city. He was making a run for it. "Let him go," Alina said when Adrian told her. "Let him disappear. We're safe now." But Adrian couldn't let it go. Valentini had threatened his family, had terrorized Alina for 7 years, had murdered David Morrison and never paid for it. "I need to see this through," he told Alina. "I need to watch them put him in handcuffs." So they went to the airfield together, federal agents leading the way. Valentini was standing next to a private jet when they arrived, and for the first time Adrian saw fear in the man's eyes. Not fear of arrest, fear of his daughter. Alina walked toward her father with Adrian at her side, and the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the tarmac. "It's over," Alina said. Her voice was steady. "You're going to prison for the rest of your life. And I'm finally free." Valentini looked at her with something that might have been regret. "I never wanted this for you, Alina. I wanted you to be strong, to be a Valentini." "I am strong," Alina replied. "Strong enough to walk away. Strong enough to stop you. Strong enough to choose love over fear." She took Adrian's hand. "And I'm not a Valentini anymore. I'm a Calloway." Federal agents moved in. They put Valentini in handcuffs while he stared at his daughter. As they led him away, he called back, "He'll leave you eventually. Men like Calloway don't stay. Not for girls like us." Alina didn't flinch. "He already chose me," she said. "Every single day, he chooses me. That's the difference between him and you. He knows love isn't weakness. It's the only thing that makes us strong." Valentini was put in the car. The door closed, and Alina Calloway turned to her husband and smiled for the first time in days. "Take me home," she said. So Adrian did. 6 months after Antonio Valentini was sentenced to life in federal prison, Alina woke in Adrian's arms to sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. The penthouse no longer felt like a showcase of wealth, it felt like home. Her sheet music covered the piano, her books lined the shelves, her coffee mug sat next to his on the nightstand. Adrian was already awake, watching her with an expression that still made her heart skip. "What?" she murmured, sleep-rough and smiling. "Just memorizing this," he said quietly. "You hear every morning I wake up afraid it's a dream." Alina shifted closer, pressing her lips to his jaw. "Not a dream. I'm real. We're real." They lay there in comfortable silence, legs tangled, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her spine. Outside, Manhattan hummed with life, but inside this moment, the world was just them. Eventually Adrian kissed her forehead and slipped out of bed. "Stay here. I'm making breakfast." Alina watched him pull on sweatpants, this billionaire CEO who now cooked her pancakes on Sunday mornings, and thought about how far they'd come from that terrible night in the hospital. How love had found them in the wreckage and rebuilt them both into something stronger. 20 minutes later, Alina padded into the kitchen to find Adrian at the stove, concentration on his face as he flipped pancakes. The domesticity of it made her chest ache with happiness. He'd learned to cook for her, this man who'd never had to do anything for himself before meeting her. Now he knew how she liked her coffee, knew she preferred blueberries in her pancakes, knew she needed quiet mornings before facing the day. "You're staring," Adrian said without turning round. "Can't help it. You're beautiful when you're concentrating." He laughed and turned, spatula in hand, looking impossibly handsome in the morning light. Alina crossed to him and wrapped her arms around his waist from behind, pressing her cheek to his back. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For choosing me, every day, even when it was hard, especially when it was hard." Adrian set down the spatula and turned in her arms. He cupped her face in his hands, these hands that had signed billion-dollar deals and now held her like she was made of something precious. "Alina Calloway," he said seriously, "loving you has never been hard. It's the easiest thing I've ever done." They ate breakfast at the island, knees touching, sharing sections of the newspaper. Adrian had rebuilt his company from near collapse into something even stronger. The investors who'd fled came crawling back. New contracts materialized, but he ran it differently now, less obsession, more balance, always home for dinner with his wife. Alina had started teaching again, but now at a music school Adrian had funded in her mother's name in Queens. She worked with kids who couldn't afford private lessons, teaching them that music could be salvation. Her hand had healed as much as it would. She'd never be a concert pianist, but she could play, could teach, could share the things she loved most. Some scars they'd learned became part of your story instead of the end of it. "I have something for you," Adrian said suddenly, setting down his coffee. Alina raised an eyebrow. "It's not my birthday, I know, but I've been thinking about something." He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket, and Alina's breath caught. "Adrian, we're already married." Married in a chapel at 4 in the morning because we were running for our lives, he corrected. That's not how I wanted to marry you. Adrian opened the box to reveal a ring that made the platinum band she wore look like a placeholder. A diamond surrounded by sapphires, delicate and perfect, catching the morning light like captured stars. This is how I wanted to do it, he said, and then to Elena's shock, he slid off his chair and knelt on the kitchen floor. Adrian, let me do this right, he interrupted gently. Elena Rossi, who became Elena Valentini, who became Elena Calloway, who is somehow all three and none of them all at once. You are the bravest, strongest, most extraordinary person I've ever met. You survived things that would have broken most people. You've built a new life from nothing. You taught me that love isn't weakness. It's the most courageous thing we can do. His voice went rough with emotion. I asked you to marry me in a hotel room because we were desperate. I'm asking you now because I choose you. Because I want to spend every morning for the rest of my life making you coffee and every night falling asleep with you in my arms. Because you took a man who thought he was complete and showed him he'd been empty all along. Adrian took her left hand, thumb brushing over the simple band. So will you marry me again? Really this time? With everyone we love watching and nothing to run from and forever ahead of us. Elena was crying, happiness streaming down her face as she pulled him up and kissed him with everything she had. Yes, she said against his lips. Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes. Adrian slipped the new ring on her finger next to the platinum band, and Elena laughed through her tears. You're ridiculous. This ring probably costs more than I made in 5 years teaching, worth every penny to see you smile like this. He kissed her again, slower, deeper, until they were both breathless. I'm thinking June, garden wedding, small and intimate. Just the people who matter. Your brother's family, Elena said, already planning. My old students mark us because he saved us more times than we can count. And we'll write our own vows, Adrian added. Real ones this time. Not the generic script from that chapel. Elena pulled back to look at him. This man who'd hit her with his car and somehow become her whole world. You know what's funny? That night you almost killed me was the best thing that ever happened to me. That's dark, Mrs. Calloway, but true. She grinned. What are the odds? You of all people, me of all people. Finding each other in the worst possible way and making it into this. Adrian kissed her forehead. I don't believe in odds anymore. I believe in you and me and whatever force in the universe decided we needed each other. The weeks before the wedding passed in a blur of happiness. Adrian found himself smiling at random moments in board meetings, signing contracts, reviewing quarterly reports. His assistant commented that he seemed different, lighter. James said he'd never seen his brother this content. The truth was, Adrian had finally figured out what all his money and power had been for, building a foundation strong enough to protect the one thing that actually mattered. Elena flourished too. Her students adored her. The music school expanded. She started composing again, pieces that came from somewhere deep and healed. And Adrian would sit in his study listening to her play, marveling that this woman had chosen him. They hosted James and his family for dinner regularly now, the penthouse finally filled with laughter and children's voices. Adrian's nieces climbed all over him while Elena taught them simple piano songs, and watching her with them made Adrian think about the future. About a family of their own someday. About tiny hands and first steps and teaching someone else about love. On a Tuesday night, 3 weeks before the wedding, Adrian came home to find Elena standing at the windows in one of his shirts, looking out at the city. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, chin on her shoulder. What are you thinking about? He murmured. Elena leaned back against him, fitting perfectly in his embrace. I was thinking about the night you brought me here. How terrified I was. This penthouse felt like another prison, beautiful but cold. She turned in his arms. Now it's my favorite place in the world, because you're here, because it's ours. Adrian kissed her slowly, pouring 6 months of love and devotion into it. When they broke apart, he said, I need to tell you something. Elena tensed slightly. That sounds ominous. It's not. I promise. Adrian took her hand and led her to the couch, pulling her down beside him. I've been talking to my lawyers about establishing a foundation for families like yours, people trying to escape organized crime, witness protection situations, anyone who needs resources to start over. Elena's eyes widened. Adrian, it would be called the Elena Morrison Foundation, he continued. After you and David, it would fund legal assistance, relocation expenses, trauma counseling, job training, everything you needed 7 years ago but didn't have. His voice softened. I can't change what happened to you, but I can make sure other people have better options than running scared. Elena was crying again, and Adrian was learning these were her happy tears. That's God, Adrian, that's incredible. Say you'll run it with me, he said. Make it something that matters. Elena kissed him, and her answer was yes. The wedding took place in the private gardens of her estate in the Hamptons on a perfect June afternoon. White roses everywhere, string quartet playing softly, 50 people who actually mattered instead of 500 acquaintances. Elena wore a simple gown, ivory silk that made her look like something from a dream, and when Adrian saw her walking down the makeshift aisle toward him, he had to blink back tears. She was smiling, radiant, finally free. When she reached him, Adrian took both her hands and forgot everyone watching. There was only Elena. I wrote you something, he said when the officiant prompted him for vows. He pulled out a folded paper, but when he opened it, the words he'd rehearsed vanished. Instead, he spoke from the heart. Elena, you've heard me say I love you 100 times, but I need you to understand what that means. His voice was steady despite the emotion. It means I choose you in the morning when I'm grumpy and you're cheerful. It means I choose you during board meetings when I'm bored and wishing I was home. It means I choose you in traffic, in arguments, in moments when love isn't easy or romantic but just showing up. He squeezed her hands. It means that night in the hospital when I saw you for the first time, some part of me already knew. You were going to change everything. Elena's vows were simpler but hit just as hard. Adrian Calloway, you saved my life in every way a person can be saved. You gave me safety when I was hunted. You gave me love when I'd forgotten what it felt like. You gave me a future when I thought I didn't deserve one. She smiled through tears. I was so scared of you at first. This powerful man in his fortress in the sky, but you showed me that power without compassion is empty. That strength without kindness is just cruelty. You showed me what real love looks like, not control or possession, but partnership and choice and standing beside each other through hell. She reached up and touched his face. I'm not your project or your responsibility or your redemption. I'm your wife, your partner, your home, and you are mine forever. When they kissed, the applause faded to nothing. There was only the taste of her lips, the feeling of her arms around his neck, the knowledge that this was real and earned and worth everything they'd survived to get here. They celebrated into the evening, dancing under string lights as the sun set over the water. Adrian held Elena close during their first dance, and she whispered, happy. More than I knew was possible, he replied honestly. Later, much later, they stood on the terrace of their hotel suite, still in wedding clothes, watching the stars. The ocean whispered against the shore. Elena's head rested on Adrian's shoulder, her hand with both rings catching moonlight. Tell me something, Adrian said quietly. Anything. Elena was quiet for a moment. Then, I used to have nightmares. Every night for 7 years. About that prosecutor dying. About my father finding me. About never being safe. She turned to look up at him. I haven't had them since the night you came to that hotel room. Since you told me you loved me. It's like your voice chased away demons I thought would haunt me forever. Adrian felt his throat tighten. Elena, let me finish. She smiled. You think you're not good at love because your parents were toxic. But Adrian, you love better than anyone I've ever known. You love with everything you have. You love courageously and stubbornly and so completely that it makes me brave too. She stood on her toes and kissed him softly. Thank you for hitting me with your car. Adrian laughed, the sound startled out of him. That might be the weirdest thing anyone's ever thanked me for. Best accident of my life, Elena said, grinning. They stood together watching the ocean, and Adrian thought about probability and chance and the cosmic accident that had brought them together. 3 years later, Adrian stood in the same music room where Elena had once cried over her damaged hand, watching her teach their daughter to play her first song. Sophia was 2 years old, tiny and serious, pressing piano keys with careful concentration, while Elena guided her fingers. The late afternoon sun painted them both golden, and Adrian felt his heart do that thing it always did when he looked at his family expand like it might burst. Dada. Sophia spotted him and abandoned the piano, running on toddler legs into his arms. Adrian caught her and lifted her high, delighting in her giggles. Elena rose from the piano bench. One hand on her very pregnant belly. Baby number 2 would arrive in 3 months and smiled at them with so much love it still took his breath away. How was work, she asked, kissing him hello. Long, boring. I spent the entire acquisition meeting thinking about getting home to you too. Adrian set Sophia down and she immediately ran back to the piano, banging keys with joyful abandon. How's the foundation coming? We helped 4 families this month get relocated safely, Elena said, pride in her voice. One of them was a teenager trying to testify against a trafficking ring. Your lawyers got her emancipated and into witness protection. She's safe now, Adrian. Because of what we built, they'd both learned that happiness wasn't an ending, it was a practice. Some days were hard. Elena still flinched at loud noises sometimes. Adrian still had nightmares about losing her. But they'd built something stronger than trauma, more powerful than fear. They'd built a life on purpose and choice and showing up for each other every single day. That night, after Sophia was asleep and they were tangled together in bed, Elena said, do you ever think about that night? In the hospital. Sometimes, Adrian admitted, I think about how close I came to walking away. How easy it would have been to just pay your bills and never see you again, but you didn't. Because you asked if I was alright, he said quietly. Nobody had asked me that in years, maybe ever. And I realized I wanted to know you. Wanted to understand how someone could almost die because of my carelessness and still have compassion left for me. Elena kissed his shoulder. I saw you, Adrian. Past the expensive suit and the armor. I saw someone lonely and brilliant and trying so hard to be something he wasn't. What wasn't I? Cold, you thought you were cold, but you've always been fire. She looked up at him in the darkness. He just needed someone to notice. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Adrian surprised Elena with a trip back to the chapel in Queens where they'd first married in desperation. It looked exactly the same, cheap and slightly run down and perfect. The same officiant was there, older now but still willing to perform a ceremony at odd hours. Why here? Alina asked, confused and charmed. Because this is where it started, Adrian said. Where we chose each other with everything falling apart around us. I want to remember that, want to honor it. So they stood in that tacky chapel and renewed their vows again. Just the two of them this time, and it felt full circle. Like closing one chapter and beginning another. When they walked out into the Queen's night, Elena pulled Adrian into an alley, the same one where they'd first kissed after fleeing Perseant. Kissed him breathless. I love you, she said against his lips. I love our life. I love our family. I love that you keep finding ways to surprise me. I love you more, Adrian countered. Impossible. Want to bet? They were laughing as they headed home, hands intertwined, and Adrian thought about the man he'd been 5 years ago. That man would never recognize himself now, would never believe this happiness was possible. On a Tuesday night that felt like any other, Adrian came home to find Alina at the piano, playing the piece she'd composed the year they met. Sophia was doing homework at the coffee table. Their son, Michael, 18 months old now, was building block towers and knocking them down with glee. Adrian stopped in the doorway and just watched his family, feeling gratitude so profound it was almost painful. This was what he'd been building toward his entire life without knowing it. Not the company or the money or the power. This living room full of noise and love and the woman who'd taught him what it all meant. Alina finished playing and turned, catching him watching. She smiled that smile that was his and his alone. You're home, she said, like it was the best news she'd heard all day. Adrian crossed to her, kissed her hello and said, I'm home, and he meant it in every way that mattered. Later, after the kids were asleep and they stood at the windows overlooking the city that had witnessed their entire story, Alina leaned back against Adrian's chest and sighed contentedly. What are you thinking? He murmured, arms around her waist. Alina was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, I was thinking about the girl I used to be. Running scared, thinking love was something other people got, not people like me. She turned to look at him. And then you happened. Adrian kissed her forehead, her cheeks, finally her lips. Soft and sweet and full of promise. Best accident of your life. Best accident of my life, Alina confirmed, grinning. They stood together as the city lights glittered below them. Two people who'd found each other in the wreckage and built something beautiful from the ruins. Adrian thought about contracts and obligations, about how he'd once believed love was transactional, something to be managed and controlled. Alina had demolished every wall he'd built, shown him that real love was terrifying and exhilarating and worth every risk. Hey, Alina said softly, pulling him from his thoughts. What? I'm happy. Right now, in this moment, with you. I wanted you to know that. Adrian tightened his arms around her. This woman who'd saved him without even trying and pressed his lips to her temple. I know, he whispered, because I am too. And in the penthouse that had transformed from a showpiece into a home, 58 floors above Manhattan, Adrian Calloway held his wife and understood that some things couldn't be built or bought or controlled. Some things, the best things, happened when you stopped running from love and let it catch you instead. He'd thought love was a distraction once upon a time. Turned out it was the whole point. She'd become his purpose, his home, his everything. And in the end, that was the only empire worth building.